Right, we are back here in studio. One of the things we get to do here on Fox 12 now is have our reporters here and our investigators to talk about big stories that are happening during the day that they follow along with and what you've been covering here. Ezra,
Yep,
great
absolutely.
to have you, as always. This is certainly one, in the world of media, this is a big deal, and there's a reason it's big for everybody else beyond that, too. But
Yeah.
can you fill us in here on what's
Absolutely.
happening?
You know, this is one of those stories where everybody in whatever industry they're in, they've got their inside baseball stories. It's
Yeah.
like, and for us here, it's always like, well, there's always interesting things in the industry, but when does it actually matter for people who maybe aren't
Right.
in the industry?
Yeah.
This is one of those stories that kind of breaks out from being an industry story to being kind of a mainstream story. So let's back up and talk about these two companies. It's Nexstar and Tegna. Now, Nexstar and Tegna are both media companies, and the way that they work is just like us. So many local news stations are owned by a company and then affiliated with another company. So for example, here at Fox 12 at KPTV, we're owned by Gray Media and we're affiliated with Fox. And so that's kind of the general structure of a lot of local news stations around the country. So these two stations, Nexstar and Tegna, each own lots of different local news stations around the country. Oh, and they're affiliated with all kinds of different, whether it's ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, those are the big ones. And so what we're seeing now is that for a while we've been hearing, and they announced, I think it was almost a year ago, that they wanted to merge. They wanted to bring these two companies together. Now, by doing that, they would create by far the largest media company in terms of local news stations. So this would be one company that owns a huge amount of local news stations. By one a calculation that we were looking at for the story, they would have access to about 80% of households that watch TV they would be connected with one of these stations owned by this new conglomerate. So that's kind of some of the setup here. So they've been wanting to do this acquisition, this merger. Just in the last few days, it's suddenly kind of like steamed ahead right to the finish line. And so what we found out, or what we've seen over the last 3 days, is on Wednesday, a coalition of 8 attorneys general from around the country, including here in Oregon, Attorney General Dan Rayfield, filed a lawsuit in federal court asking a judge to basically suing, saying this is illegal, saying that this is against antitrust, right, that this creates unfair competitive advantage for these two companies, and asking a judge to put a stop to it. The very next day, yesterday, what happened is that this merger got clearance, more or less, from the FCC and the Justice Department. Now, both of those federal organizations, federal agencies, have a stake in this. The FCC are the ones who manage all the rules and regulations around broadcast TV. They're the ones who are in charge of enforcing things like not being allowed to swear or use curse words on air or on TV. Also, rules that you might be familiar with recently in terms of fair time and making sure that both people are getting, or both sides of an issue are getting equal representation. That's specifically actually with candidates. So anyways, that's what the FCC does, and they have to approve these kinds of mergers because that's their world. That's part of what they regulate. So yesterday we heard from the FCC, Brendan Carr said, good to go, signed off, said no objections from us, feel free to move forward. Additionally, the Justice Department had a stake in this because of antitrust issues that were very clearly at the forefront as soon as this deal was kind of announced. So also yesterday, the Justice Department said, we're not going to do anything. They said, we're not going to intervene. We don't see any issues here. They didn't say go for it, but they said, we're not going to stop you. We're going to let you kind of move forward. So both of that was announced yesterday, and a few hours later, Nexstar sent out a press release saying the acquisition is complete. Just with it, I mean, it was quick. The exact same day as they got the kind of the clearance or the green light from the federal regulators. They had that press release ready to go, announced it and said the acquisition is complete. And just for context, that's a $6.2 billion deal in terms of what that sale, what that merger looks like. So that brings us to today. I heard yesterday that the attorneys general that had filed that initial lawsuit were getting ready to file a temporary restraining order. That's been filed just within the last hour or so. And really what that is, not a lot of new information there. That's basically the attorneys general saying, hey, judge, we just filed this lawsuit. Now there's a new development. They've announced that this acquisition has happened. Can you please order them to stop any actual business mergers while our initial lawsuit carries forward and we figure out whether or not there are legal problems with this deal? That brings us to today, and that's pretty much the update.
And that's where we're at. I mean, which is a lot, but thank you for explaining that, because I think there are a few things too that, just on the public side of things, that it is, it's a confusing world. Media can be a very confusing world on how it's run. And to understand that, I think the one thing there that you said at the beginning, a lot of stations, they're owned by one company and affiliated with a different company.
Absolutely.
And traditionally, you would think, okay, well, it's got this name on it, they must be owned by them, but that's not actually how
most
that
of the time,
works.
unless you're in a very large market. It's a little different in the big markets, but Portland isn't one of those biggest markets.
Yeah.
And so every station here is owned by one company and affiliated with another.
Yeah. So that's a good thing for people to know there. And so and just for reference, the two stations, in our market, there would be KGW and Coin.
Right.
KGW's Tegna, Coin's Nexstar.
I believe that's correct.
And so that would be their companies merging. So just to give you a local reference on what that means, those two stations would be under one umbrella. What that means, that's pure speculation on that part, but what happens from there. But yeah, that's what that would be. And then the other thing too, I know with the FCC is traditionally under regulations, no one company can own more than 39%.
39% is historically the rule. Not historically, that is the statutory rule.
Yeah.
That so no station can own more than 39% of a market. That rule was explicitly. That's why the FCC had to weigh in. They basically had to give permission to not follow that rule, to say, yes, this is a rule, here's your exemption, and that's what they did.
Yeah, so where this goes, so with this lawsuit now, we'll see if that slows things down or not.
Yeah, so basically what happened is this lawsuit was filed in federal court today. It's now in front of a federal judge who's gonna decide whether or not to put this pause in place. At this point, I think a lot of our viewers are familiar with temporary restraining orders, but that's what it's asking, is put a pause in place. They're asking for a quick decision. I don't anticipate that this will be super quick. I don't think we'll hear anything today, but we'll be on the lookout. We'll be watching for what that judge says. Either way, it'll be a pretty big deal, because it'll either say, hold on, no, don't keep moving, or no, you guys can keep going forward. Either way, there's some pretty significant consequences. To the media landscape.
Thousands of jobs too.
Thousands of jobs
could be wrapped up into this.
Absolutely. There's a lot of markets around the country where there would be, instead of, that would lead to one company owning two news stations in the same market. And as you can imagine, it's not a great business strategy, business situation to own two stations doing the same thing and competing with each other. So there's a lot of concerns around, do things merge? And anytime you merge, how that works, right? So there's still a lot of questions. And we'll be following this as it develops.
Yeah. All right, Ezra, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We will keep everybody up to date on that. And again, this is Fox 12 Now. We're live streaming here out of the newsroom. We're going to take a break, and then actually our own Spencer Schott's going to join us to talk about some developments downtown. And we have that coming for you. We're going to talk about sharks at 1:30. There's a shark that's a great white shark that's been tracked off the Oregon coast by scientists. Yeah, it's pretty fun. So we're going to be hearing about that at 1:32. So a lot more coming up today. We just need to take this quick break. So thanks for watching us on whatever app or website you are on. We appreciate it. There's always something going on those, whether it's on your phone or for Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku.
We stay busy.
There's a lot. There's a lot to check out. So thanks for being here with us. We'll be right back with more here at Fox 12 Now.